Hello and welcome to the 6 online Bartitsu and Antagonistics Forum online session. I really try not to call these classes. I'm not really a big believer in learning martial arts online. It's much better if you can do it with people who can actually correct you and teach you as you go. But this is great if you have an interest in Bartitsu. I can explain some of what it is that we actually do. For those of you who are regular students of mine, or indeed study in other Bartitsu classes, you'll recognise what I'm doing. It's a good way for you to keep mentally active, and hopefully you can grab a stick and you can come along and find a bit of space and you know, join me in your own homes or gardens or whatever as well. Because these are on Facebook, which is the main reason I'm doing it here rather than Zoom or anything else, is that it's there permanently. So at any time you can go back and look at these videos. I mean, once all of this isolation thing's over, I'll probably put them all on YouTube. But for now, they're there. You can go back, you can look at them, you can practice along with them, you can learn forms, you can look over some of the combinations we've talked about. And if you're really having difficulty at sleep, you can put on the section in the middle where I ramble even more than now, and you'll be asleep really quickly, okay? And hopefully then the rest of the class goes in subliminally and you become amazing. Okay, that might not work, but you're here now, I'm here now, and for the next hour we're going to be continuing looking at cane, which we started looking at last week. Last week we looked at the first half of our cane form. Explained to you a little bit where it comes from in terms of it being Vignay style cane. So it was developed by Pierre Vignay, who we spoke about last week as well. The other thing I looked at last week was cane handling. So that's kind of what you've missed. If you've missed that and you want to go back and catch up on a week, or you want to go further back and pick up on pugilism and savant, that's all fine. As I said, they're there. But tonight we're going to be looking at the second half of our introduction to basic cane. And then, yeah, that's what we're doing for kind of the next hour. So as we start every class, we shall start by falling in. So I start from my attention stance and we fall in. Okay, we're now technically and officially at the start of class. So, one thing I would say is, although I'm not doing a lot of jumping around and a lot of press-ups and sit-ups and all that kind of stuff at the minute, we do those in other classes, but most importantly for now, you know your own body, okay? I had a surgery on my left wrist, which this is my left one, just to confuse people who are watching this online, and it's got mirrors and things and it gets confusing. This is my left hand. I had an operation on it. It's pretty weak these days, so I can't use a cane as well in my left hand as I think I can. So I have to bear that in mind when I'm training, yeah? So I can't do as much on my left side as I can on my right side. You will know your own weaknesses, okay? Whether it's a dodgy leg, asthma, any number of other things, you know your body, okay? So go at a level that fits with you. I don't want you trying to match me or just prove you're better than me, because you probably are anyway, so don't worry about that side of things. But I don't want you pushing yourself harder than you need to be, okay? So for now, work at your own pace. Right, so we're going to start off with a quick recap on what we did last week, which is our first half of our first form. So I will start facing you, and I'll go through it this way, and I shall go through it this way, and possibly this way. So you've seen it a few times, just to remind you of where we are. We've done the first half of a semicircle, but just so you're aware of the techniques. We started off with a downwards hit, followed by an upwards hit, followed by a lunge, and back to guard. We did a parry, then we did this hook technique we talked about, and a strike to the head. From there we recovered back into a defensive stance. We stepped forward, we did a high strike sideways, a low strike, back up to a high strike, and back to our defensive guard. From there, we did a parry and a step through, came through with a pummel strike to the face, and then back to guard, which means I'm turning my back to you here. Okay, so hopefully that looks vaguely familiar. Something like... Okay, I'm aware I'm kind of disappearing off the screen a little bit. I'm trying not to go too far away. You can't hear me, or it does too many dodgy things to the lighting. But hopefully you get that is a remember of where we've been through, okay? And all of that worked off those cane handling skills we looked at to start with. Before we launch into this half, we need to look at a couple more cane strikes, as it were. Because last time we really looked at coming across, coming diagonally down, coming straight down on top of the head, and coming straight up. Those were really the attack lines we looked at. And defensively, we really only looked at a roof block, or this kind of, these high attacks, high blocks to either side. Okay? That's really the only ones we looked at last time. So we need to add a little bit more to our vocabulary before we start looking at this next one. So, the first thing we need to look at are the diagonal upward strikes. So, we've got these very nice, I'm over-exaggerating these. Golden rule, hand never comes below the eye. So if I'm doing it normally, it would be here. Yeah, I'm just exaggerating so you can see the cut. We have these diagonal X's that we will use quite a lot to rain down attacks. This time we're going to be using a lot more the diagonal upwards. So we need to be aware of that strike and that strike. So these, instead of coming down and kind of trying to break the collarbone, these are coming up into the ribs. So from here, it's there, it's there, there. Okay, so you're aware those attacks exist. If you've done Hutton Moulinet sequences, is probably the standard one most people go through. If you think about it, there are 8 lines of attack through any individual point. And it's true in cane as well, okay? So that's us covered most of those now. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay? Hopefully I've remembered them in the right order there. So now we've looked at all of those, we're going to be using those ones which we haven't used previously. The other thing we're going to use this time is a thrust, and in fact a lunge. So whilst we would normally hit with the cane side on, we're looking for that kind of impact, there's nothing to stop you ramming the point of the cane home as well. So from our guard, what we'd normally do is put a drop step in and straighten the arm. It's not a hugely powerful hit, but you're aiming nose, throat, solar plexus. Any of those, if you land even a weak hit, will do quite a bit of damage, or at least a lot of distraction. We also, if you ever end up in a low guard, there's nothing to stop you dropping the point and thrusting that in, as I would think of. Stoccata, punta reversi. Sorry, I'm going into my my slide sword again there. But you have those kind of low-line thrusts that we can use as well. We're going to look at those as well. So, when we look at our guards, we're obviously fine using these guards to cover those upwards, diagonally upward attacks we've just looked at there. Yeah, I can drop down, and anything coming diagonally up, or indeed diagonally down, will get caught on this side. So that's fine. The problem you have is, with a cut that comes up through the centre line, yeah, so we've looked at ones coming down on top of my head, I can parry up here, it's the ones coming up from the bottom, or indeed thrusts that are coming into my chest or my stomach or my face, will tend to come down that centre line, okay? I need to be able to defend against that. And the best way of doing that is by moving into one of the guards that I already know. So from here, when I go from my normal guard position into my parry across here, you'll notice the point drops and sweeps across that centre line. Which means if a thrust is coming in, I'm going to catch it and move it offline with that same parry. If there's an attack coming from the bottom, I might go a little lower, catch it and move it across so it comes up on this side of me. Of course, if I want to be really fancy, there's nothing to stop me bringing the point across and kind of sweeping out to that side, but it's a little bit slower. So normally, I'll just drop and go to that side. And that's how I'm going to defend most things that come along the centre line. So, we don't actually need to learn any new defences, we just need to be aware of this concept that moving from one parry to another goes through that centre line. And when I'm going through that centre line, I can catch things that are coming in on it and move them offline so I don't get hit. So it's about how you use the parries to effectively defend yourself. Hopefully that all made sense. It's what we're going to be kind of using some of these techniques for where we're going next. Now, The next thing I have to say is I have to start off with an apology. The next technique that is in this form is rubbish. And there's no getting away from that. It is a canonical one, and it looks lovely. And I accept it's meant to be done against an unarmed opponent, but I think it still leaves you so horribly open, you end up getting punched rather than doing any damage. But it is in all of the textbooks, so you're going to get to see it anyway. Okay? So after we have done the last bit of that form here, where we took a parry across this way, we stepped, we did a pommel strike, and then we turned to face and into guard here. And then I realised I've missed out several parts of the form, and everything I've just told you refers to a move in about 3 moves time. So you can tell how well I have it all in my head tonight. I apologise about that. I will come back to a useless move in a minute. We're actually, before we get there, going to go to some really useful moves. Probably 2 of the most useful moves we're going to use, okay? So forget all that stuff. Store that in your memory. I'll come back to it in a second. For now, we've come back on guard against our opponent. Hand up on the centre line. We're ready to attack our opponent. We're going to go with a downwards attack. So this is very much like the start of the form, where we came down with this swing over into an attack. But this time, we're expecting them to parry. They've been hit on the head once before. You go and do it again, they're definitely going to parry. So we're going to try and use a sneaky tactic, which we talked about last time, that sometimes we use it like it's a sword, as if it's got a true edge, and we're going to attack along the lines of the knuckles. And other times we're going to use different parts of the stick, because it's a stick. It doesn't have an edge, we can hit with any bit of it. So in fact, in this case, if this was a sword, the point we're going to attack with is actually the back of the blade. And that's how we're going to deliver this one. So rather than striking down here, I'm going to come right high onto my tiptoes and strike here. So if I'm here, and you can see that my hand is high, and the point of this is way down low, kind of buried inside my own head. Which means if the other guy parries, I'm going to use the stick here. So if the other person parries, if I come over in a normal strike and it hits there, they're clear. If I twist and attack here, you can see the parry is not sufficient to actually block that parry. So this is what we call a wrap shot, and it's one of those things we can do because of the nature of what a cane is. So rather than just coming in straight down that centre line, we're going to come up and flick it round over the top. So that's our first move of this next bit. Bang, in the top of the head. What people will start to do, obviously, is then just parry really high so that they don't get hit in the head. Which is fine, because that means if their cane is up there, you have all of the rest of them to hit. So after we've done this sweep up here, we're going to come down with a really low attack, travelling upwards. Normally, this is a nad shot. Okay, we've tried to hit them on the top of the head, they've thwarted us. As revenge, we're going to hit them really hard between the legs. So we go up, and then this one my students tend to call the ta-da, because from here, I bring both hands round and I go, ta-da! And it's as simple as that. However, that has quite a lot of movement because I'm coiling it in and throwing it back out again, but I can get more by using a double drop step as I do it. Okay, so I'm going to lift both feet off the ground so that when I hit, I'm actually hitting with the momentum of my weight and gravity as well as just the movement of the cane. So instead of high and low, we're going to go high and low. High, low. Comes round much quicker, much faster, gets my head lower quicker as well. So if there is anything coming at it, I am defended. Okay, so from here, over the top, low, recover back to guard. So that is our next bit of our form, is to add that on. So we've walked around our opponent, we've hit them in the head a couple of times, we've come back to guard. Now we come to our useless move that I spoke about earlier. So all of that stuff I said before just erase that, jump it forward, edit it, put it in here, which I would do if this wasn't going out live. But it is, so I can't. So, what we're going to do is this technique here, as I said, is not a great technique, but it's used a lot. So from here, if you were my opponent, the angle you're looking at me now, I'm going to pass forward and step right offline. Here. Now this is before I've delivered an attack. From my point of view, that's just offering the back of your head to somebody. I don't like it. I've never managed to make it work, but it's there, okay? So once we've passed forward once, we're going to pass back then with this other leg to complete the full circle. And as we do, we're going to bring the cane through my opponent's kneecap. Which if you could make it land would be great. But problem one, my back is to my opponent. Problem two, there is nothing protecting my head whatsoever when I execute this move. So it breaks a couple of the cardinal rules. I don't particularly like it, but it's there for the sake of completeness because you will see it is in there. So from here, we've gone over the top, we've gone down, we've recovered. We're going to step right the way off, through, and then recover back to guard. And I realise I've gone off screen again. So from here, I'm going to step, and recover back to guard. And we've moved around 90 degrees again from where we started. But now we're going back the way we came originally. So if we started off facing our opponent, we've moved right the way behind them, and now we've moved half the way back again. So we just have to finish that off with the rest of those techniques. The next techniques are ones that I love. I'll teach you the trick to making them work in a second. Okay, so once we've come round, we've recovered from that one, so we've stepped, we've come through, recovered, we're in offensive guard here. My next tactic is to come in with that diagonal hit here. Okay? So from here, we've looked at it before, we're just going to coil the wrist, okay? Everything needs to be in the wrist. If I start trying to do this, I get hit in the head. Everything stays in front. There's my attack. Now I'm going to let this carry low this time because I'm assuming either I've hit his stick or I feel that this is a comfortable thing to do. Okay, there are times where you break the golden rule and let it come below your eyes. This is just one of them, okay? And the reason for that is I'm going to strike, stop it at my waist, pointing my opponent, and then thrust that point forward, trying to hit them in the stomach. Down, thrust. Down. Once we've done that, we're going to reverse that. So from that thrust, we've kind of already leaning forward. We're not going to pull it back because we want to keep the forward momentum. So from here, I'm going to go into that upwards diagonal strike to bring me back to my guard. So we've gone down, thrust, up. And you'll see, I start with my arm high, it comes in close to the body, I thrust, and then it stays out away from my body. Okay? So I've pushed my hand forward, okay? So what I'm going to do, strike, thrust, strike, and then I'm going to lunge that point into my opponent's chest and then back to guard. So from here, I come around once, I thrust, back up, lunge, back to guard. So that's our next little sequence. We're obviously doing an attack and then a movement. So that was our attack coming through. So really we've only got one more technique to add onto the end of this to take us back to where we started. So this is from our guard position after we've recovered from that lunge to here. We're going to step off and parry right the way across our body. Okay, it's a very open parry, but realistically the parry's here. I'm just putting the movement to give even more distance between me and whatever is attacking me. Okay, it depends how much faith I have in the cane. If the other guy is using a broadsword, I can't be convinced this is going to actually stop it. It could be that I'm worried about him doing a wrap shot rather than over the top that way, coming in sideways and twisting it at the last moment, and coming in with that bit into the back of me. So I may want to parry and make sure I have extra room to spare. Once I've done that, I'm simply going to pivot on this front foot and strike down at my opponent's head as I turn to face him. So that what happens is my back foot and the strike land at the same time. Okay? So from guard, off to one side, turn and strike, back to guard. And that is where I started from. That same kind of spot. So one last time from here, out to one side, turn and strike. Out to one side, turn and strike. Okay? I'll do it from here as well, just so hopefully at least one of the angles works. So from here, out to the side, turn and strike, back to guard. And that is all there is to the second half of the form. Okay? So the second half, combined together, looks something like this. So from here, we stepped in, went high, low, back to guard. Okay, going to try and do this sideways. Hopefully there's enough room. So from here, and back again. So hopefully you can see the other side of it. And that's the second half of the form, okay? It's not particularly eloquent or lovely and flowing, but what it does is it teaches you all of those basic movements that you need for Ken. So once you've got that, you can combine it with the first half we looked at last time. Just seeing what my time is. It's going okay today. So, let's give this a try. So I'm going to try, probably this side is best, because I'll arc facing you, and then back again. That's the plan anyway. So, started off with a drop step, lunge, back to guard, block, hook and step, high, low, high, pommel strike, guard, high, low, back, step, through the kneecap, we're going to step forward, strike, thrust, strike, lunge, back to guard, offline, strike, and I'm back to where I started from. I'm going to do that from the other two directions so you get a chance to see it. Hopefully that will then make sense of where it is we're going. So this time, I should verge around to this side, end up with my back to you, and then come all the way back around this way. So that is the entirety of the cane form. It gives you most of the defences, the concepts of moving round, a lot of the counter strikes and things that are going to be used. You now have those mechanics, and the more you practice that form, the better you'll get at them. I did say I would teach you the secret of how to make the cuts followed by the thrusts work. Okay, and this is where we start coming to talk about something called measure, which is an understanding of you and your opponent. How tall are you? How long are your arms? How long are your weapons? How fast do they move? How fast do you move? It's a whole heap of things you're trying to take into consideration, and it's all about making sure you're in the right place when you want to be there. And it's almost impossible to teach. But hopefully you'll understand what I mean with this tactic. So if I'm here and I come in with my strike, I would be expecting them to parry that. And it stops about here. I can't thrust, it's going over their head. So from there I'm likely to either come back to guard or even possibly come back to a defensive guard. It stops there. However, what I can do is, rather than swinging this out here, is I can pull it back to my body as I do it, as you'll see it does in the form. So rather than out here, I bring it here. Now my opponent is expecting this, in that case, to be a couple of foot longer than it actually is. So they're expecting that parry to be a couple of feet closer to them than it actually is. So they miss it entirely. They've missed that parry. Their cane is up in the air waiting to parry it, and you slip straight past it, and then you've got that thrust coming solidly into the stomach. Likewise, rather than in the form, we're nice and simple. We just keep it low, and we swing it up to high and keep it fairly far forward. Again, that's relatively easy to parry, but there's nothing to stop me doing that same technique of pulling it in closer so they miss it. Which means their parry's over here somewhere and I'm pointing straight at their face, ready for that thrust in. So by knowing what your opponent expects and then playing with that, you can overcome them. Okay, there's a lot of footwork you can do, there's a lot of handwork you can do. This is just a nice simple example. There to there is a couple of foot difference. But it's really hard to tell if I'm facing you how far away that actually is. That versus that looks very similar from your point of view. From the side, it's really obvious what I've done. But if I'm fighting you, you won't be standing at the side, you'll be facing me like you are. So I can then trick you into parrying too soon and getting that strike in. Likewise, parrying too soon, getting my lunge in. So that's the trick to making that work, and it touches on some of those more complex ideas, as I said, like measure. So that is, I'm just going to double check and make sure I haven't missed anything. No, that is everything that I wanted to cover in terms of the second half of the fourth form. So you now have Form 1, Form 2 and Form 4. I know we've missed 3, don't worry about that. Which covers your pugilism, your savate and your cane. If you have these, you have the vocabulary, as I said. You have the words to start having a conversation in 2 out of the 3 Bartitsu ranges. Okay? You still have to learn how to join the words together. You still have to learn the grammar of it, the grammar of the fight, to actually how to link everything together. But you have the words at least to discuss fighting at weapons range or extended range. And indeed fighting closer in your striking range, you have that covered too. The only range we haven't covered is up close and personal when we start looking at grappling and jiu-jitsu. Funnily enough, that's third form. But I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. For now, we're going to have a little chat because it's me rambling for a bit. Oh, this is actually a specifically designed rambly bit rather than the rest of the time where I just talk too much. So, what I wanted to talk about is the importance of striking. Knowing where it is you're trying to hit is very, very important. Now, as an example of this, if I'm using the cane, I've got to be careful where I hit, okay? With a cane, if I hit something soft and meaty, like a bicep, crunch, that cane comes in and strikes. That's really going to hurt, okay? I mean, really, it might numb my arm if I manage to hit a bit of a nerve cluster. It's going to hurt. I'm going to end up with a giant purple bruise right the way over most of my arm. It's not going to stop me fighting. It's not going to disable that limb. Yeah? I mean, it might temporarily. I might have to shake it out a bit. But you're not doing any long-lasting, real damage. You're just doing superficial damage. Now, if I'm a little bit lower, and I come in at the back here, and smack it right on my elbow, okay? I'm going to break my elbow. Well, I wouldn't be breaking my elbow. The other guy's breaking my elbow in this case. that's coming in. That is going to shatter my elbow. This arm becomes completely useless, probably, or at least potentially permanently. So hitting the right area is important, because it's the difference between disabling a limb or hurting somebody. It's the difference between taking somebody out of a fight and annoying them more. Okay? So it's important you know where to hit to actually do what you're trying to do. The other important thing is to understand that it's not the same for every circumstance. Every weapon has its own preferred striking areas. An example of this would be if I took a saber and a rapier. If I'd thought about it, I'd have brought them out with me. They're in the garage, sorry. But from our point of view, all I want you to think of us is a stabby weapon. Okay, 3 musketeers, rapier, I run the other guy through. It goes in, it comes out the back, okay? That's your rapier. Your saber is your military edge sword. I'm going to slice the guy up. Yeah? Big cuts, leave him bleeding everywhere. Okay? Civilians have always preferred pointy weapons, and military have normally preferred slashy weapons. The reason for that is where you're trying to hit is different, and also the effects that they will have are different. So you need to know the weapon to know the right tactics to use for them. Okay? So a rapier is gonna kill somebody. Okay? When you stab somebody, one of those comedy phrases that always comes up, you only need 2 fingers worth of penetration. Okay? I only need about a couple of inches like that into somebody to have gone past their ribcage and into an internal organ that will kill them. Eventually. Which is great for a civilian duel where I want to kill the other guy. The fight's called off, doctors can come, maybe patch him up or not, but you know, there's no intimacy about worrying about his reply as such. Because he can take a puncture to a lung and keep going for another minute. And that's long enough for him to give me one as well. Okay? So knowing that, I've got to be very defensive, I'm looking for my attack, and I'm unlikely to use this in a battlefield scenario because I might stab him, he's still going to keep coming at me, and I don't want that. Whereas what I want in a battlefield situation is I want to put him out of the fight. So I'm going to use something like a saber, where I can cut a huge chunk of flesh off his arm, through his torso, and he will collapse. There's blood everywhere, he goes into shock, he is out of the fight. Does he die from it? Much less likely. Okay, let's leave out infections and battlefield conditions and triage and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the actual wound suffered, it's actually much less of a wound, but much more of a visible effect. So knowing what you're trying to achieve and what weapon you have determines where you need to hit. Okay, so what I'm trying to explain is the importance of knowing how to hit somebody and where to hit them. So let's look at what we've looked at so far. I'm going to put the cane down a second. The first thing we started with is pugilism. Okay, hands are up here. Our pugilism, our fists coming in here. Where do you want to hit with a fist? Okay, now if you've ever watched a movie, the standard one, you want to hit them square on the side of the jaw, poof, and they go down in one hit. Don't ever try and do that, okay? What you're going to do is realise that the jaw is quite a big, hefty piece of bone. And your, I want to say tarsals, metacarpals, can't remember which one's hands, which one's foot, it's been a long time since I did any anatomy. The small bones in my fingers are small bones. When you collide a small bone with a big bone, the small bones break first, okay? I might dislocate the jaw. I might cause some serious injury. I am going to break my hand. So I need to be careful of big bones. What I want to hit with my hand, okay, because I want to keep my hand functional, is soft and squishy things or very, very small bones, okay? So I'm not trying to break arms with a punch, okay? What I'm looking to do is find the soft, squidgy areas. And where are they for pugilism? Okay, the first soft squidgy area is right here, is your nose. Okay, it's not soft squidgy, that's actually a small bone, but it's somewhere in between. Mine is now entirely cartilage after years of kickboxing. But this giant noggin here, if you can smack right on the end of that, blood goes everywhere, my eyes start watering, that's a really good palpable hit, okay? Next area you work in, let's keep with the small bone since I started with that one. The side of your skull, your kind of occipitals, kind of lobe area around here. If you can get a solid hit in there, okay, it's going to mess up your vision and potentially you can fracture that because it's quite a small piece of bone. If you're being really clever and you've got a hook coming in, you can try and get behind the jaw and literally dislocate it, but normally that's too complicated to strike to aim for and I wouldn't advise it. Okay, so if you're hooking in, you're looking for the side of the head up here, not down here. If you're coming straight on, you're looking for the nose, get them in a nice soft squidgy bit there. The next bit is the neck, okay? If you're coming in from the side, yeah, boom, coming up here, into the side of the neck. Big, soft, you've got your carotid arteries in there, you can do a lot of damage, okay? If you're coming straight on and you can hit the kind of Adam's apple, front of the throat here, your windpipe, again, that's a stunning blow. It's all... And whilst they're trying to remember how to breathe, you can be braying into them with many other tactics, okay? The other place that's really good is more of that kind of soft, squishy stuff that as you go down lower. We don't generally hit around here. Solar plexus is nice if you can hit it. I mean, if you don't know what that is, find the bit at the bottom of your sternum here and push against it relatively hard and you will feel instantly a little bit sick. That's the reaction we want. If we can make you feel that, we can keep hitting you. But really going down lower, the stomach, you've all been hitting the stomach. That kind of reaction. And if we go round, you've got the sides underneath the ribs, that all hurts. And if you get right the way around, you've kind of got the kidneys and things here that really, really hurt. I mean, if you want to put your finger like that and put it in the small of your back and dig around for a bit, eventually you'll get a bit where your body goes, whoa, no, that's your kidneys. So if we can hit that bit, yeah, that's again another soft, squidgy bit that we can aim for. Okay, so those are your primary pugilism targets when we're talking about the hand, okay? I'm not going into this in a huge amount of depth, so I'm not bringing in the elbows, which changes the game at this point. What I'm looking for is where I'm hitting with my hands. Okay, when we move to Savat, we're looking very much down at the lower portion of the body now rather than the upper. And unlike the... So, yeah, fists, small bones, squidgy bits. Feet, we want to hit, again, soft, squidgy bits. Now, by that, I don't mean like big muscles in the back of your leg. You're not going to do anything serious on that. But there is one primary soft, squidgy area between the legs, which will again drop somebody. Okay? So there's your soft, squidgy. If you're feeling adventurous, you've got your stomach here as well, and potentially up into those kidneys with your fouettis and your more round kicks, if you're kicking a bit higher. I wouldn't necessarily advise it, but some people like that. But quick sharp shot to the nads, there's your soft squidgy. The other thing you can do is attack the joints, okay? So you don't tend to kick into the muscles of the leg. Instead, I want to kick the knee. Normally from the side or straight on, but I'm trying to break stance, okay? Ideally by breaking the knee. So if I can get one of those kicks coming in solidly to the knee, you know, I can do my step through, my coup de pied bas, coming in at the kneecap. Any of those kind of things that destroy the knees, or indeed even the ankles, will do you most amount of damage when you're looking at Savat. Now that is, the caveat there is the Savat that we do because we're using the pugilism for the upper body. Okay, Savat has different striking techniques and does a lot of more high kicks if you're looking at a full Savat syllabus rather than the merged syllabus we do. That's my caveat for that. But when we're using it, we're looking for the joints, we're looking for the soft squidgy. The other place we look for is the front of the shin. Not because you're going to do any serious damage, but you're going to cause a lot of pain. There's a lot of nerve endings there. You'll have all bashed your shin at some point and it hurts like hell. So again, if we can scrape our foot down the front of the opponent's shin, just give a quick kick into it, anything that causes pain draws all the attention down. That's a target area as well. Okay, number 3, we have Jiu-Jitsu, okay? And again, the caveat here is how we use Jiu-Jitsu. In Jiu-Jitsu as a full syllabus, there's a lot of striking. You've got, I think it's Tami Waza and things they call it. I'm not an expert on that kind of stuff. So they have, again, different areas. We don't use any of that because if we're going to be doing any attacks, we're going to be using it with our fists and our pugilism. So what we're actually looking to do instead is entirely manipulate the joints. Okay, that's what Jiu-Jitsu is for us. It's how we use it. Okay, we're going to find a joint and we're going to try and either bend it in a way that it locks up and therefore locks the rest of the body, or we're going to try and make it bend entirely the wrong way to cause pain and therefore either immobilize or break our opponent. Okay, so that's entirely joint work, whether that is something as simple as like the ball and socket of a thumb. Most likely it's going to be a wrist, it's going to be an elbow, it's going to be a shoulder, it's going to be a knee, it's going to be an ankle, it's going to be your head and your neck. Those are all the kind of targets we'll be looking at for jiu-jitsu. Finally, we come to cane, which is what we've been looking at earlier. This is, again, where we're looking for primarily sensitive areas, or we're looking for medium-sized bones. What do I mean by medium-sized bones? Your nose is a little bone. You can still break it with a cane, that's fine. Your clavicles, and you can feel them, there's bones that kind of run down there. You smack down a cane on one of those, you can happily break one of those. As I think one guy who I was training with, it wasn't me that did it, I think got his collar broken at an event I was at in November. So it does happen by accident. So if you're trying to do it, absolutely no problem. You might be able to break, I want to say ulnar, quite near to the bone, surface of bone down here. Again, I might be getting all of my anatomy wrong. It's been like 20 odd years.
The radius for the thinner bone.
I thought the radius was on this side because your thumb went in a circle.
When you're showing your body, I can't see it.
You can't see. Okay, that's my fault. We're having a discussion about which way the... Anyway, sorry. So this one here that runs from the little finger down to my elbow. I think that's my ulnar. Doesn't matter. That bone anywhere there, it sticks close to the surface.
Radius.
If you take a blow on that you can snap as well. Elbow. Yeah, there's a nice pointy bit there. You can break it. Okay? Ribs. They are relatively small bones. You can hit those. Even if you don't break them, you can crack them. That causes problems with breathing. That again all gives you the advantage. You've got the solar plexus that we've looked at before. We've got the throat. We've got the nose. We've got these bones here. But now, yeah, go for the chin. That will be dislocated, no problem. Top of the head is relatively thick, but you can certainly smash down on a cane hard enough to do some serious damage. Okay? So your targets change depending on what you're holding and what you're trying to do. And you need to understand where you're actually attacking at. Attacking the wrong point, no matter how good your tactics is, no matter how good your technique is rather, if you're hitting the wrong place, you're not going to do the damage, you're not going to achieve the required result. Okay? Anyway, that's enough of me randomly talking. Let's get back to some more actual useful stuff.
About 50 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll probably overrun again. I'm beginning to realise that. Okay, so, when we're looking at cane, so far we've looked at it very much one-handed. Okay, we talked last week about the fact you need to get as good using it in one hand as you are in the other and be happy to change between them. Even literally in the middle of a fight where I can change from one hand to another quite happily. You need to get used to those kind of transitions. One of the common ways of doing that is through the double-handed block, and it's something that Vignay spent a lot of time working on. So what I mean by that is, when I'm in my normal stance and I come to block my head, my hand comes up here. What Vignay tends to prefer is as it comes up, I grab it with the other hand. Now this has several advantages. One, it's a much stronger block. I've got twice the power pushing up into that because I've got two hands on it. Okay? But the main advantage is that I have more options for striking back. Okay? Option one is to release with the hand that I just grabbed it with and come in with an attack as I would do normally from my true side or my on side. Okay? Other option, once I've pulled back and caught this, I let go with my on hand and deliver an attack to the other side with my off hand. So equally, from here I can go with equal ease. And from this point of the block, it is impossible to tell which one I'm going to do. Okay? For those of you who are familiar with other styles of stick fighting, the other nice thing you can do from here, of course, is pull it back into your shillelagh stance, you know, and move on to those kind of tactics as well. We're not going to look at that today, but just be aware that it's there. But for now, block, strike, block, strike. Now, the other thing we can do, and this is the importance of how you hold the stick. This here is the main part of the stick and my hook out the other end. I block, I let go with the other hand, main part of my stick here, hook sticking out. If I was to bring it up and catch with my hand the other way, I've still got the decent block. But if I let go and transfer to my offhand, I now have a tiny little stick and a really big hook. Okay, so you've got to make sure that when you pull it back, your hands are in the same direction. Okay, really obvious for the overhead. When we start looking at the sideways, it becomes a bit more of a problem. The reason for that is we're going to use that hook. Because once we've taken that block, rather than a straight strike, we're going to use it as a hook. If I bring up my crude demonstration, because isolation stops me having multiple people here, the attack is coming down towards my head. This is the stick, this is their arm. I'm going to take that block here, curve that across, so that when I strike at the head, it moves their cane out of the way. The advantage of that is, I can take this below my eyes safely because I know that their cane is down here. Yeah? It's all the way over here. It's not an offence to my head, so I can then quite happily thrust and recover back so I can get that extra strike in. Likewise, if I decide to go with the other way, so that attacks come in there, I can take that same hook and twist with the other hand. So it doesn't matter which way I go, I can still use those hooks. Which means even after I've parried, they don't know which hand I'm going to come off with. And either one I come off with, I can come with a straight strike, or I can come with a hook to try and control them as I strike, which gives me a lot of options. Likewise, if I was to look at a standard block coming across the body here, if I take that strike and again use both hands to push it out, again I've got a stronger block. But what I also have is if I let go with my offhand, I've got an on-hand high strike, high block. If I take the other hand away, I've got a low block in my offhand. Okay? So at this point, this is, I suppose, Schrodinger's block. It's either high with my offhand or low with my high with my on-hand or low with my offhand. And again, I can either come with a strike from my on-hand or a strike from my offhand with equal ease. So, or. And again, likewise, there's nothing to stop me if I use that low strike. We've already looked at the hook that goes across over my opponent's guard and the strike comes across the face. If I take the high option, I can still do that same hooking technique, but I have to change it slightly. So if the attacks come in, I've blocked it here. This time when I go over, I'm actually, instead of striking the face, because what happens is their cane slips out the way, I strike down at the knee as I'm coming through to keep their cane out the way and then reply back. So again, if that's coming in at this side, I get my block, I get my hook across and then go low rather than high. Okay? It's just a slight variation in that technique. So if my hand starts high, the strike goes low. If my hand starts low, the strike goes high. Okay? It'll make a lot more sense when you can get a partner and try this out with two people. Okay? There's just nothing we can do about that. That's why we're here doing it online in the first place. Okay, so we've now got up here, and we've got out to that side, so logically we've got across to this side as well. Yeah? Except what I've done there is exactly what I don't want to do. Here, I've put myself in a really awkward position. Yeah? And even if I let go with this bottom hand, I've kind of got to find a way out of my own embrace to actually deliver the strike, and likewise at the top. So what I need to make sure is when I am blocking to the side, the hand, the side that I'm on, that's the hand that's low down. So rather than taking it as a normal block on this side and grabbing, I need to bring that hand down and make it a low block and grab across with the other hand. Now when I let go, I can take my offhand or my on hand equally happily. So it's either here, here, or here, but it's never here or indeed here. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. And again from here, here, yes, I'm confusing myself now. From here, I can let go It's low, so I can hook, and my hook comes high. I can go here, let go, my hand is high, so the hook goes low. Okay? Which means that at any point, I can block and come off with either hand, or I can even block and come in with a kick or whatever else I might choose to do. I can even come in with a block, come back and come into a completely different fighting style. All of that means it's very hard for my opponent to start predicting what I'm going to do. Okay? And that's really where Vignay wanted you to get to that point. So you're using a light cane. It's not going to do a vast amount of damage, but it moves fast. And the other guy has no idea where it's going to be. You can meet every parry quite happily, but then whether you come off left or right-handed, whether you hook, whether you attack with the front of the cane or the side of the cane or the back of the cane, gives you so many options it becomes almost impossible for the other guy to start trying to predict what you're going to do. Okay? Which means you are just running circles in him and hitting him whilst he's still trying to work out how to make anything work because his brain's shutting down trying to follow what you're doing. Okay, we can take this one step further and move to a slightly awkward guard that does appear occasionally. So rather than here, we're going to drop it behind the arm and brace it. So by that I mean both my hands are pulling forward so that if I let go with the bottom hand here, it comes off the top hand with quite a lot of power. Likewise, if I let go with the top hand, it comes underneath with quite a lot of power. So I can actually come on guard here and quite happily block any attack that's coming at me. And one more, that one, that's coming at me. Or indeed I can do my strikes, recover back to guard, pass off to the other hand, back to my defensive guard, high, low, pass it back to the other hand, uppercut and back to guard as I'm coming out. I can start moving it between my hands, either as an action in itself, as part of an attack, or as part of a defense. So this is why you need to be equally good with both hands and learn that coordination. Once you've got it, the other guy just cannot keep up with where your weapon is, where your tactics are, and you can just overwhelm them by constantly changing things. Whereas most weapons, once you know the basics of them, they're always going to be the same. Cane, the idea is it changes and it changes and it changes. So that's really what I wanted to get in with this second half of this class today. Just a little short one there. So, in terms of homework, if you are following along with doing all of the homework and stuff, practice your cane handling skills, but now try and start adding in the offhand on occasion as well. Look at your shadow boxing. We looked at this for both punching and kicking. Start doing some cane shadow boxing. You can start to pretend where your opponent is, strike and parry against them. Start doing all of that, you'll build up a lot of the control and coordination needed. Continue to work on that fourth form, and you'll have all of the individual techniques you use. So that would be my homework. If you're following along, practice those things and you will get better. Okay, so today we've looked at that form, we've looked at the two-handed. It's really worth having a look at. It can get really amazing once you get quick at it. Going forward, next week, fingers crossed, I'm hoping we're going to start looking at grappling. I'm saying fingers crossed simply because I've ordered a bit of kit that will hopefully let me demonstrate some standing grappling and things without needing another person here to help me. I say fingers crossed because I've no idea in the postal system whether it will actually arrive on time. It should arrive on Friday. It may not be here by Tuesday, in which case I might have to change the plan. But the plan as it stands is next week to look very much at standing grappling. We're going to be starting to look at how we close in from a striking range into a grappling range and how we can get some of those basic locks and grapples that we've talked about on. And that will be the plan next week. If that doesn't go according to plan, we'll be doing something else and I'll let you know when I know. The only other thing I was going to say for today before we wrap up is I've had several people questioning about the t-shirts. I do have mine on, it's just it's a bit colder out today, so I've had my jumper on, but if I pop this off, I got stripper music last time. Where's that gone? Right. There we go. Michael's coming back with it. These t-shirts here are available to buy. They're a club t-shirt, so I just have them available. People can go and buy them and use them for training. If anybody really does fancy one, all of the proceeds go straight into the group just to keep us doing things like this and doing our normal training. I will put a link of where you can buy them from onto the bottom of the video once we've finished up here. So if you desperately want to support us, you can always give us money. Just talk to me, I'll take your money, that's fine. But if you want to have a lovely t-shirt, it is possible just to buy those, because a few people had asked, so I thought I would mention it. Right, I think we're kind of coming up to time. Got a couple of minutes left. Yeah, that takes us really to where we are at the minute. So next Tuesday will be our 7th session. I can't believe we've been in lockdown like a full month and a half now. But I will see you then, hopefully. As usual, if anybody has any questions, just put them in the comments. I'll look at this in about 20 minutes and I'll just answer any questions that are there. If anybody wants to talk specifically, message me and I'll go through stuff happily with you one-to-one as well. That's not a problem. Other than that, we shall fall out, because that is what we do at the end of a class. So we go from our attention stance and fall out. So, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to spend the last hour with you. Do your training. Come back next week. It would be great to see you. Other than that, until then, stay safe. Look after your loved ones. Above all, be kind. Okay? Take care.